Hi, this is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle, and today I'm going to be working on a Penn Mariner 49 deep sea fishing reel. This is a very heavy duty reel. It's intended for shark or other large fish, tuna and so on, and it's usually used in a trolling mode, and many times it's used with wire line due to the weight of the fish. This reel comes in a couple of assemblies. The 49, or the Super Mariner, on the back plate you'll see Super Mariner, has a 2 free spool release mechanism similar to a Penn Squidder, in that you can free spool the release line and you can also take the drags off so that you can fight a fish backwards when reeling and not tear up your drags. So it's really designed as a heavy-duty reel. It's similar in nature to a Penn 60 Senator, except that the Penn 60 Senator will have a broader case. The reason why this has the narrow frame is to avoid frame twist, and it uses the wire line. So it's a great reel. I picked this one up at a fisherman's flea market. I wanted to show you how to take this apart, service it, including the drags, lube it as appropriate, and put it back together. This reel, when I got it, I realized that it's a little noisy, probably needs some lubrication, probably been sitting around a while. This one is fairly clean, but if you wanted to clean it, a recommendation of mine would be grab some 4/0 steel wool. That doesn't scratch, but it does work well in cleaning. Or you can use a scrubby pad and use a metal polish. In this case, I've got a Turtle Wax automotive chrome polish that works well. Also, if you notice the reel that you pick up and it's got a lot of tarnish on it or corrosion, one of the things you might want to do before you get started is hit that with some general purpose oil. In this case, WD-40. That'll help to get behind the screws and limit your risk of breaking screws off. The other thing I would suggest is you're working with all of this, wear gloves. I got this one on the side that's going to hold all of the greasy parts. And I use a parts tray. In this case, it's just the bottom of a milk jug. But if you keep all of your parts in that parts tray, you don't have to worry about finding them when you go to reassemble. Okay, we're going to get started by taking the drive side plate off. And I'm going to do that first by removing the handle. The handle's first piece is a small set screw that locks the handle nut. That's why I use a parts tray, because they're small. And then to take the handle nut off, you can use the wrench that came with the pen if you have that. I have a little bit more of an industrial size one that also has a sizing up for the Penn 60s. And simply twist, and you can use the wrench, and sometimes if it's free like this one was, you can turn it off by hand. Okay, next off is the handle, and then next off of that is your star drag adjusting nut. At this point, I'm going to tell you, if you're not familiar with working on the reels, then what you should do is take out a camera, cell phone camera, regular camera, whatever, and as you take the pieces and the parts out, take a picture at the interim steps. That way those intermediate steps are captured, and if you've forgotten your way, you can go back and look at the pictures and say, oh, that's where that part came from, and this is the sequence I took it off in. Okay, so we have 6 posts, and we have 1 reel foot. Those are all attached by screws. The 6 posts have a longer screw. The 2 on the bottom are shorter screws, and you want to make sure you have them in the right sequence, because if you don't, if you use the longest screw on the bottom, it will protrude from the reel seat, and sometimes that extra bit hanging out on that reel seat catches the line and causes a snag. So 2 of those, 6 of the long ones, and that'll give us access to the drive side assembly, the spool, and the bearing side plate. Okay, so I use a manual screwdriver, just kind of enjoy working with my hands. You could certainly use a battery operated screwdriver if you wished. one of the things I recommend if you're using that battery screwdriver is make sure on reassembly that you don't have the torque down too high. If you really drive that screw in at the during reassembly, you can break the chrome rings. So let's just take a look at this. This is amazingly clean on the inside for the age of the reel. This reel has been around a long time. You can see that there's a double spring assembly here. The first upper one is the one that releases your free spool. The bottom one is the one that takes the drag out of gear so that you can back wind the reel and takes that anti-reverse off. In this case, this is astonishingly clean. Again, I got this at a flea market. The first time I've seen it on the inside. This is a surprise. Most of the time these will be tarnished. A lot of times there'll be a lot of excessive grease and so on, but that one's in good shape. On the metal spool, the metal spools are there because they you don't with the wire line, it takes a lot of torsion. Plastic spool would break down in that. This is not a casting reel. You don't have to worry about trying to throw a lure with this. It's not in that. And this is your bearing side plate. There's one bearing. It's totally dry, which is kind of the way it felt when I was cranking the reel. I'm just going to put a little lubrication in the bearing slot, and I see the clicker is going to be nice and loud. I like to put a little on that just because it gets water from time to time. If you're wondering what the lubrication I'm using a Penn reel grease. There's a lot of reel greases on the market. This one works well for me, so I use that one as well. Okay, we're going to take this side plate drive off now. There's 4 screws you can see in the back that correspond with the ones in the front. They are different. There's 2 screws up top that are partially threaded. There's 2 screws on the bottom that are full threaded screws, and you need to make sure you put them back in that sequence. The partially threaded screws go around the springs in the free spool release assembly, and if you have a threaded one there, sometimes the spring can catch. You'll notice I have my glove on, I have the gear side down, I've released the screws, and you can see that the bridge plate is free at this point. There's a spring mechanism in this one that controls the back lever, and if you're just not familiar with that, that spring can shoot. In this case, it's going to be a flat spring, I believe. That can shoot, and then it's going to cause you time to either search for the piece or worse yet, lose it and have to go reorder it. Okay, so on this side then, it's not unfamiliar territory if you've worked on any Penn reels. This is just an extended version of a Penn Long Beach or a Senator type of a structure. 2 screws, a collar, a gear, a spool gear, and a transition piece to the free spool. This side is a little bit different in that there's an extended dog. This one is what's controlled to release that dog spring when you actuate it so that you can back pedal the reel. And here's that flat tension spring I was talking about that holds the dog in place when you want that function to work. So again, those go in my parts bin. Here's the 2 screws that came out that are partial threaded screws. And here's the 2 screws that are fully threaded. Again, on reassembly, these go on the bottom, these go on the top through the springs. Okay, this is your gear side. This is a unique gear to this particular reel. It's larger than the Penn 6.0s, and otherwise it's pretty much the same. You have your bridge assembly and the back washer, collar, metal washer, fabric washer. It looks a little dry. I'll put some grease on that. Eared washer. Notice they have the 2 ears on it. And a fabric and metal. Sometimes they're a little bit to work when they're dry. And then the bottom one is a fabric washer as well. We'll pull that out. Okay, so metal, fabric, eared, fabric, metal, and so on. These are a little bit dry, so we're going to go ahead and lube them as part of our general drag service. So this can go on by itself. I use a drag grease. It's Cal's Universal Reel and Drag Grease. There's others out there in the market. This treats me well. And you just want to put a little bit on it. I tend to put them on to the fabric piece and just a little dab on both sides. You don't have to over lube these. Also, if you pull the reel apart and it's got a Teflon drag on it, you do not need to use reel grease, and generally it's not recommended for the drags. And that's because it'll just cause them to slip. Okay, so fabric. Now it's time to move the next fabric one. Fabric metal, fabric eared, fabric metal. These are in good shape. If you need to order them, these drags still are available through pennparts.com on the internet, or there's other sources obviously, but I do know I've used them, and you can get these. Okay, so then the eared one goes in, and you can tell the ears, there's 2 indentations in that main gear. That ear drag sits on that. This is the last of the fabric ones. And again, you don't have to go crazy with the lubrication. Most of it's going to press out anyway, which kind of brings me to another thought. When you're not using the reel, don't keep the drag engaged fully tightened down. That just presses the lubrication out and causes you to have to do this more often. So, okay, the last metal washer, the collar nut, that's ready for reassembly. Okay, so now we're going to go and look at the free spool release mechanism. You press down on the spool gear. That'll enable you to work off the retaining transition piece. You can take out the spool gear and the collar. Now, a lot of times you're going to pull these out of reels. There's going to be a lot of crud on there, right? So again, you can use your steel wool. If it's just light accumulations, you can use a Q-tip, cotton swab. Okay, you just want to check to make sure that that's good. Then just a little dab again on the carrier piece, and the spool gear is ready to go back in. And then there's a center bearing. You can put that in. Now these are sitting in the indentations. If you took your reel apart, they simply go in and out on that indentation. Again, very similar to the Long Beach or Penn Senator series. Okay, those go back in, sit on top of the springs, press down. I'm going to put a little bit of lube on that release mechanism. I'm just going to slip that back over. Okay, and now we're reassembled, relubed, and then the last piece is to lube the other release mechanism. Now, you really don't need the lube on this one because it's riding on this this little knob here, but it doesn't hurt to put that in. All right, how to reassemble now. So we press down on the spool gear, take the bridge assembly and insert that. Turn it halfway, just so you have the gear covering the other gear. And you want to grab the threaded bridge screw. Remember I said there's 2 different ones. The threaded bridge screw goes on the bottom. Your dog slips behind the bridge plate and over the screw. Like that. Then the metal tension spring sits on top of the dog and in the groove. So you can see that it's sitting on top of the dog and in this groove here. Once that's done, you can rotate the bridges. Oops, that just popped out. Rotate this around fully, and you'll see the screw line up with the screw hole, and then you can start the reassembly. So that's a and I don't fully tighten these because there is play in this. You want to make sure you got all your holes lined up before you go ahead and tighten them all down. Okay, so the one that's partially threaded goes up top and through that first spring collar gear assembly into the bridge plate. There's 2 more of those. And again, this is the value of a parts bucket. You don't lose them. Again, 1 more threaded that goes on the bottom. 1 more partially threaded, which goes through the spring assembly on the other side. And once you get that last one seated, you can tighten them all down. Again, don't over tighten these, but make sure they are snug. Also, another tip I use, do not use Loctite. That might be great for stopping the screws from loosening and boat vibration, but it's miserable in terms of ever going back and trying to reassemble. Okay, then I just turn it over, test it, make sure it's all functioning. In this case, it's driving right. The lever's in the proper spot and continues to drive. The anti-reverse, in this case, it's engaged. Disengage, you can back pedal the reel. So everything is working the way it should work there. The internals have been lubed. The parts are clean, so we're going to reassemble. The spool with the short side goes to the back. I like to put a little bit of lube on the shaft assembly from the spool. And then we'll bring this back on the other side. Line these up with the holes, and then again, you recall we have 2 different size screws here. We have the long screw, which is the post screw, and the short screw, which is the reel seat screw. And we just want to make sure that they go in the right spots. So this is a post screw. And I like to alternate where I'm putting all the screws in. So I go top to bottom, side to side in this case, just to make sure that I have equal balance as I reassemble the reel and I'm not causing undue torsion along the way. So top to top, side to side, and repeat as we have 8 screws here. Take a side screw there and a side screw here. As I said, this is a heavy duty reel. What I just did in this assembly, if you have a Penn 6.0, it's almost identical with the exception that you don't have this second lever. So you'll have a little bit of a different dog spring assembly. Sometimes those are held in by screws, springs, coil springs. Most of the time they're held in by coil springs as opposed to being held in by the flat spring. However, the procedure is the same. You bring that bridge plate up halfway, you load the dog spring in, and then you complete the rotation of that bridge, and then tighten them down like we did. Okay, so again, the short one goes on the bottom. The other 2 screws go on the sides here. You have to flip that lever to get the last one in. And we're just about done with this reel. So it takes about 15-20 minutes to do this. If you know what you're doing, don't rush. You know, what's 15 more minutes if it takes you half an hour? You do it right, and it's going to last you a long time. Take any shortcuts, and they tend to come back and get you. So sometimes I've wound up where I thought I had some things and had to take the reel apart completely and repeat all the processes because I was just trying to make something go fast as opposed to go right. Okay, so then there's a collar ferrule that sits on top. That was the thing you saw me knock out early. And we got the star drag adjustment. And we have our handle nut. Once the handle's on, then I can work on tightening that star drag down a little bit more. Oops, wrong side. Okay, tighten the nut. Now there's, on the handle nut, there's indentations on there. You want to make sure you have the indentation lined up with the stop screw hole. Otherwise the stop screw won't fit in. And the last piece is that stop screw. That's a flat-headed screwdriver. All these are. The screwdriver I'm using is an electrician's screwdriver. It's got a rubber jacket on it, which I like because you can turn the screws using the shaft, and it gives you some extra grip as opposed to using the handle. It just feels comfortable in the hand. Okay, so we're done. We're going to give it a test. All right, that one drives nice. Here's your free spool. Spool is running nice. Back pedal. The drag is on. Working. Back pedaling. We can back pedal and reel. So this one's ready to go fishing. So I hope that's been helpful to you. I hope it's given you some tips and techniques on how to rebuild a reel. And I hope you got one that you're working on that can take you fishing in the near future. Having said that, this is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. I've rebuilt other reels and have videos out available in my collection. If you want to see other Penn reels and other manufacturers' reels, including spinning reels, go take a look at those videos as well. Again, thank you for watching the video.